عادي, just be in wudu already, and to go. If you need to go to do wudu, then obviously the toilets are where they were last week. Inshallah, we'll come back and we'll look into praying Maghrib. What? The Adhan goes at what? 6:27. 6:27. Inshallah, so we'll break then, we'll pray, inshallah. That should be break as well. And we'll come back and we'll finish off, inshallah. Today's class is a bit more heavy. Alright, there's a lot more to cover. And these slides will be made available to you, inshallah. So don't worry. If there's going to be things I'm going to be saying that won't be on the slides, mashallah, just put over here, make good notes. Your name again? Han Yusuf. Anik, mashallah. Stands out. Can you rest me follow his example, make notes? Inshallah, please, that'll be great. Right. Without further ado, we're going to start, okay? بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. ومن تعلم وتعليم وتذكر وتطوير ونفع انتفاع وفاء الاستفادة ودعا في المدى إلى الخير وحفظ مسجد الله وسنة سبحان الله الحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Follow the silence, please. Bismillah. Again, it's going to be heavy. I make no excuses because it's a heavy topic. There's a lot to get into. Try and get as much as possible done. If you have to have a coffee or something to drink just to keep yourselves awake, then listen now. Okay. The Jibril Hadith, which is basically the hadith we're going to be using to answer the two questions that we have in mind. Right? It's called Simplifying the Chaos, because I think there's a lot of chaos around. So the next 8 weeks is this hadith. We'll be breaking it down. We're going to have a historical look at this particular hadith. How the Muslims have taken this hadith and how this hadith has played out a very important role in history. Okay. Recap. Hassan. Read. Can't be wasted loud.
Allah, in His wisdom, has accomplished this preservation in the Quran. By the traditional scholars He has sent at each level of the religion. The level of Islam has been preserved and conveyed to us by the Imams of Sharia, or sacred law, and its ancillary disciplines, madhabs, schools of law. The level of Iman, by the Imams of Aqidah, or tenets of faith. The level of Ihsan, to worship Allah as though you see Him, by the Imams of Tazkiyah.
Right.
The three dimensions of our deen: Islam, Shahada, the 5 prayers, Zakah, fasting, and Hajj. Iman, belief in Allah, His angels, the scriptures, the messengers, the last day, destiny. Ihsan, to worship Allah as if you see Him, and if you cannot, then you know that He sees you.
Essentially, see the hadith, the Jibril hadith. That's a summary of the Jibril hadith right there. Can you see it? All I've done is just summarize them into this form. That's essentially the Jibril hadith. Okay? Islam, Iman, Ihsan. Right? And Islam has been historically preserved through the fiqh, through the 4 schools. Iman, Aqidah, Ihsan, spirituality, Tazkiyah, or more academically, or more accurately, Tasawwuf, which we'll talk about towards the end of the semester. Inshallah. That's the hadith broken down. Listen.
The Quran says in Surah Al-Hijr, surely we have revealed the remembrance and surely we shall preserve it. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, my ummah will not come to agree about manifest error, misguidance. The hand of God is with the majority, so follow the Sawd al-A'zam, the greatest number. Anas bin Malik said, I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam say, my ummah will never agree on manifest error and misguidance. So if you see the difference of opinion, stick with the Sawd al-A'zam, the greatest number.
So what does that mean, practically speaking, for you guys who are trying to work their way through the chaos that exists online, or on Twitter, or whatever else the chaos may exist. What does this tell you? Sisters, what does this tell you? What do you take home from this? Put your hands up.
I'm not sure, but does it mean that if there's ever confusion about...
Raise your voice so people can
I'm
hear.
not sure, but does it mean that if there's ever confusion about what sort of regulations we should follow, then we should go with the majority opinion?
The majority opinion. Okay, majority. What else?
Because that says never, so you have to look at the past timeline as well and see what the majority opinion has been for the whole period of time.
So the opinion for the vast majority of our history. Yeah? What have they kind of agreed on? Alright? Okay, anything else?
The Ummah is not going to agree about something that is wrong. So,
And the Ummah here is specifically referred to who? The laymen or the scholars? You're not fighting the argument.
no.
Yes, it's specifically the scholars. Because the laymen and Juhal, the ignorant, they can agree on a whole bunch of stuff. It's irrelevant what they agree on or disagree on. It's the scholars. The scholars, the vast majority of scholars for the vast majority of time. That's what we're talking about, right? Anything else? Have I missed something? I'm going to start picking you out one by one. Answer or you'll be asked. And I've got some of your names now. I remember some of your names from last week. Right.
This deen will be preserved, but what does this preservation look like and what form did it take historically? Surely we have revealed this remembrance and we will preserve it. Allah says, the verse is clear, the preservation should be clear as well and visible to see. My ummah, scholars, will not come to agree about manifest error, misguidance. Historically, they will not agree on something that is wrong.
Do you agree with that? All the scholars throughout history, they've all kind of agreed on some general principles or approaches in our faith. They can't be wrong. They're not infallible, but the idea that Allah will preserve this deen and the preservation of the deen will be through the ulama, then surely if the scholars all agree, that means what? That means what? Huh? What does that mean? I'm going to start picking out that. Bismillah, what does that mean? No, you should be sure. You sat through the class last time. What does it mean?
Is it correct and we should follow it?
That's what making notes does for you. You know the answer to questions. Historically, they will not agree on something that is wrong. And again, I put it there. Historically, they will not agree on something that is wrong. Alright? So if you find yourself going against what has historically been accepted, then know you are in the minority. Know that what? You are in the minority. Don't care how famous Sheikh Fulan is, or how important Sheikh Fulan is, or whatever else is going on. If historically you are in the minority, you are in the minority. Right? That's problematic. That is problematic. Because other people who are in the minority tend to be sects, or the sects of Islam will tend to be in the minority. So if you're okay with being in a minority sect, then okay. That's going to cause problems for you. As we'll come on to discuss when we get to the issue of Aqeedah. But that's a general premise. We spent a lot of time getting to that point. If you were here last week, I suggest going back and looking back at what we did last week, because we spent the whole class getting to this point. Alright, this is a very important question.
How has Islam been understood, preserved, and completed by the vast majority of scholars
again, we're looking at the vast majority of scholars, the vast majority of our Islamic history. Okay, how has Islam been understood, preserved, and transmitted? Islam here means what? The Jumla Hadith.
Like actions of the name, like the five.
Alright, more specifically though, in the Hadith?
Like zakat, and
Yeah, the 5 pillars. And other stuff as well. Next question.
How to recognize who is an authority and who is not? Everyone follows someone's interpretation, who's good, are they qualified, what makes them so, and how do we judge? In his lectures, Sheikh will answer the following. What is a madhab? What does it do? Origins? Why do we need to follow one? Can we deduce rulings by ourselves?
Hands up. Who has heard of a madhab or school of thought? Hands up. Keep your hands up high. Keep your hand high so I can see. Alright, keep your hands up. Hands up. Keep it up. Alright. Don't put your hands down. Taha, what's a madhab?
it's like the difference in like.
Taha's right, that's your name, right? That's it. Every week I'm going to ask you something.
Is it the like the difference in between how some people might practice Islam, like they follow the different imams.
Okay? Imams, different imams.
It's
You have your hand up, right?
yeah,
That was
yeah.
hand up.
It's how it's been understood by said scholar and how they've contextualized it in what context.
Okay, right, slow that down. Say that again.
It's how it's been how the specific teaching or hadith or whatever has been understood by said imam, or in what context they've taken it, or what context it's being applied in the situation.
Okay, sorry, what's your name?
Maria.
Maria, okay. Who else have their hands up? Behind. Next step over.
I didn't have a hand.
Didn't you?
No.
Who else? Zahir behind your hand up, I noticed. Ibrahim.
So there's a difference in interpretation of how we live our daily lives, how we apply Islam to our daily life, which is determined by imams and previous thoughts, some that have been lasted longer than others, and some that have come in more recent times.
Okay. Let me see. His name. Hala, what your name?
Hello.
Hala. Bismillah.
It's people's different scholars through times different interpretation of maybe a similar or the same topic. They might be the same thing, but then take different ahadiths and have different opinions how something should be applied.
That's a good answer. Part 2.
Wasn't that the 4 imams?
4 imams, okay.
And they were all like sort of spread around the Arab Peninsula, like and they would hear like they would get like messages from Medina, and they would then like interpret those hadiths and stuff to sort of like make out rulings on how to practice Islam the same way as Rasul.
Just Google that now.
No.
That's a big jump from the previous answer. Were you inspired?
Huh?
Were you inspired?
Yeah, I just remembered something I spoke to with a friend who's an imam.
Zed?
So Islam is our religion, and understand that religion there are some school of thoughts like just Toha mentioned. There are 4 school of thought which are Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali. So each school of thought has its own understanding
Yes.
and the way of practice for Islam. And so I think this is what we want.
your hand up initially. Then you have an answer. Okay. You all, mashallah, have a working understanding of a madhab, which is great for me. It makes my life easy. Quick definition.
A madhab is a school of thought that generates the rulings of fiqh, jurisprudence, concerning the 5 pillars of Islam, as well as every other aspect of your life. Tell you what is halal, haram, disliked, sunnah, permissible, etc.
If you have a question, is such and such a thing halal? Is such and such a thing haram? Is such and such a thing makruh, disliked? Yeah? Then you are going to come back to the 4 schools. The answer will be found within the 4 schools. These slides will be uploaded once I get them onto the PDF and I find the relevant person in the ISOC to put them up. So you don't have to write them all, everything down. I would say that anything that is useful to you that's not on the slides that I mentioned, bismillah. Otherwise the slides will be given the slides, inshallah. So if something's haram or makruh or wajib and you want to know is it haram, is it makruh, you are going to go to what's called the 4 schools. Alright, that's the first thing. That is a point I want you to understand before going any further. If you're going to ask a question, is such and such a thing haram, or makruh, mubah, or permissible? You are going to go to somebody who has knowledge of one of the 4 schools. I'm going to say that again because it's such a massively important point that I want you to understand. Anything to do with if something's halal or haram, you are going to ask somebody who is proficient and expert in one of the 4 schools. Take that as the first point to take down, inshallah. You are not going to ask a person who is a hafiz of Quran, for example. That's all he or she has. You're not going to ask somebody who is a tajweed teacher and that's all they have. You see. You're not even going to ask a muhaddith, a person of hadith, for example, if that's all they have. No. You are asking a scholar of fiqh, of sharia, a specific discipline that requires several years of expertise. Anything halal or haram, you want to know a particular ruling, you have to ask somebody who is proficient in one of the 4 schools, i.e. they've studied sharia in one of the 4 schools. Alright? Massively important point. From now on, until the day you leave this world, and long may that be, you ask questions to do with halal and haram to people who have expertise in one of the 4 schools. I can't say that any more clearer. I've already said it. Hopefully you understood it. Or Elizabeth has, right, bismillah. A lot of stuff can come your way right now, but just bismillah. Are you ready? Huh? Of course.
From the 5th century of Hijrah almost to the present day, the Sunni Muslims have maintained an almost unfailing attitude of religious respect and brotherhood among themselves. Virtually no religious wars, riots, or persecutions divided them during this extended period, in contrast to other historical groups, religious and non-religious. Religions enjoy an initial period of unity and then descend into an increasingly bitter factionalism led by rival hierarchies. On the face of it, Islam's ability to avoid this fate is astonishing and demands careful analysis.
Why has Islam not suffered the fate that other faiths, or even movements, have suffered? Islam hasn't had that. But we know why. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised to preserve Islam. But how has preservation come about?
Islam is the final religion, the last bus home, and as such has been divinely secured from the more external forms of decay. God has given us this religion as his last word, and it must be therefore endure until the last days. Such an explanation has obvious merit, but we will still need to explain some painful exceptions to the rule in the earliest phase of our history.
So it wasn't always happy days. It wasn't always unified. There was a period very early on when things weren't unified. We're going to spend a considerable amount of time next semester on that particular period. Alright? Because as we're going to find out, to understand the chaos we're in today, a lot of what happened back then has been revived and played out in this day and age, as you will see if you progress with me in the classes.
The Prophet ﷺ himself had told his companions in a hadith narrated by Imam Tirmidhi that whoever among you outlives me shall see a vast dispute.
And this dispute played out amongst the Sahaba. Again, next semester, we'll go into a lot more detail.
It will help us greatly to understand our modern, increasingly divided situation if we look closely at those forces which divided us in the distant past. The same forces are dividing us today. There were many of these, but only two took the form of mass popular movements, driven by religious ideology and the active rebellion against majoritarian faith and scholarship.
So there's two particular movements that caused a lot of fitna in the early part of Islam. Some of you guys may not have heard of these two groups. One of them you will have, the other you won't. But in this semester and also next semester, I'm going to go into a lot more detail about these particular groups.
For good reasons, these two acquired the names of Khawarijism and Shi'ism.
Hands up, who's heard of Khawarijism or Khawarij? Hands up high. That will change as we do.
Both are recognizable traditions and dissidents because of the ability to express the two great divergences from mainstream opinion on the key question of the source of religious authority in Islam.
These two groups had a very different understanding of what is authoritative in our faith. And it caused such massive damage in the early part of Islam, and they're still causing more extreme factions, are causing more problems in this age because they've been revived for reasons that will become clear to you as we go on.
Shi'ism developed a theory of religious authority which departed from the older egalitarian assumptions by vesting it in a charismatic succession of infallible imams.
So the Shias, authority for them lies in a succession of imams that they have, and these particular imams, that's where you go to. These are the particular imams. Very different to our four imams, but again, we're going to go into a lot more detail. I have a whole lecture next semester on the Shia tradition within Islam.
The other great dissident movement in early Islam was that of the Kharijites. Literally, the seceders, so-called because they have seceded from the army of the Caliph Ali, forthrightly guided caliphate. Calling out the Quranic slogan, "Judgment is only God's." They fought bitterly against Ali and his army, which included many of the leading companions, until in the year 38, Imam Ali defeated them at the Battle of Nahrawan, where some 10,000 of them perished.
So again, this is going to go into more detail next semester, but Sayyidina Ali's time was a time that was full of fitna, full of problems. I'm going to go into a lot more depth in that because you need to know it. But these were Muslims fighting against Sayyidina Ali. Muslims who fought against Sayyidina Ali. Right? They believed that Sayyidina Ali was a kafir. They believed that those who were with Sayyidina Ali were disbelievers. And these were believers. They were the Muslims. Everybody in that group were Muslim. Everybody else out of that group was not Muslim. And we see that being played out today in other groups. Semester 2 will explore this in more depth. Okay, so somebody mentioned timeline. Who was it?
Abbas.
Abbas? Timeline. I'm going to give you timeline throughout. I think it's important for you to have a context as to when certain things happened in relation to where you are today. So, that's what's called the Hijri timeline, the Islamic calendar. Alright? So, 0. And we are what? Islamic calendar.
1444.
Yeah, 1444. So this, what I'm talking about, happened very early on, 38, after the Hijrah. And we are, what about there? Well, let's move to the right a little bit, because this was 2 years ago. What does that tell you? Visually, what does that tell you about these problems that happened in the blue?
Was it carried on till this day?
Mu'ad, yeah?
Is it carried on till this day?
Oh, yeah. Anything else?
There's also a lot of other things that developed about Shiism and the Harijites.
Okay. Don't go too far. Let's spoil it. Let's spoil it alert over here. Anything else with the blue circle, with the blue line? What's it telling you?
So you mentioned about Battle of Nahrawan.
Very simple. It's very early on. That's what I'm asking. Something very early. Are we paying attention? It's something very, very early on that happened in Islam. We are quite far away from it. But nonetheless, some of these things, as Mu'ad mentioned, they've been played out.
Although the first Kharijites were destroyed, Kharijism itself lived on. As it formulated itself, it turned into the precise opposite of Shiism, rejecting any notion of inherited or charismatic leadership, stressing that leadership of the community of believers should be decided by piety alone.
So the Khawarij, for them, leadership and authority depend on piety. Which you're going to say, well, okay, that's fair enough. But what kind of piety?
This was assessed by a very simple criteria. The early Kharijites were known for extreme toughness in their devotions and for the harsh doctrine that any Muslim who commits a major sin is an unbeliever.
So the Khawarij believe if you commit a major sin, you're out of Islam, you're going to hell. Major sin. So let's say zina, you're going to hell. Let's say you drink alcohol, you're going to hell. You gamble, you go to hell. These people are all about you're going to hell. Right? Takfir, excommunicating people. Which is not the mainstream opinion within Sunni Orthodox Islam.
This notion of takfir, declaring Muslims to be outside Islam, permitted the Kharijite groups to raid Muslim settlements which had accepted Umayyad authority. Both caused much instability in Iraq and Central Asia and on occasion elsewhere.
I don't expect you to know too much about the Khawarij because I'm going to give you everything next semester. But based on what you just read there, would you say anything in this age resembles that particular group? Please, hands up. Hands up. Someone said the answer. ISIS. Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, all these other groups that exist and will continue to exist. As our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam foretold. Keep going? Okay, so instability caused much instability in Iraq and Central Asia and on occasion elsewhere. So, despite the Prophet passing away not too long, it's only 38 years after the Hijrah, not long ago the Prophet passed away, and this is towards the end of Sayyidina Ali's Khilafah, all these problems start to happen. Anyone the faith would fall apart. All this fitna. And I get that you don't maybe not get the full image, but it's a lot of fitna. Sayyidina Ali was killed by these people. They killed Sayyidina Ali. Yeah. But a lot of fitna happened. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to promise to what? Does it understand? Right.
Until the 4th and 5th centuries of Islam.
Right, to the 4th and 5th centuries of Islam.
At that point, something of historic moment occurred. unite itself into a detailed system that was now so well worked out and so obviously the way of the great majority of ulama that the attraction of the rival movements diminished sharply.
So the Muslims, Sunni orthodoxy, sorted itself out. They got the house together. They got themselves together. More specifically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the preservation that Allah promised, that manifests itself. Any other faith would fall apart. To have the leader assassinated and killed, and have rival groups and fitna inwardly and outwardly, any other faith would fall apart, but not Islam. But my question is this: why did it need to be sorted out? That's the question. Why did it need to be sorted out? Again, what happened?
Sunni Islam occupying the middle ground between the two extremes of egalitarian Kharijism and hierarchical Shiism, had long been preoccupied with disputes over its own concept of authority.
So while the Khawarij, these extremists, have their kind of very simplistic way of understanding of Islam, and very simplistic, and you have the Shia, they have their understanding of authority in these imams, which we'll talk about in the future, inshallah. Sunni orthodoxy was still sorting itself out, was still getting to grips with its own issues with itself, hadith and so on and so forth, which we'll explain now.
For the Sunnis, authority was, by definition, vested in the Quran and Sunnah.
Easy, right? We follow the Quran and we follow what? The sisters, But here's the problem. Go ahead.
But confronted with the enormous body of hadiths, which had been scattered in various forms and narrations throughout the length and breadth of the Islamic world,
Which is what Baha mentioned, right?
following the migrations of the companions and followers, the Sunnah sometimes proved difficult to interpret.
So the sheer volume of ahadith, sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, which have been scattered in various forms and narrations throughout the length and breadth of the Islamic world, because the Sahaba went to do da'wah. They went to different places and they passed on their knowledge. But the hadith, the sayings of what they took from the Prophet, the teaching they took from the Prophet traveled with them. And the Sunnah sometimes proved difficult to interpret. So you can imagine now, someone now needs to go out and kind of just gather everything up. Or a group of scholars need to go and gather everything up, systemize it, go through it all. Can you see that point? Yes or no?
Even when the sound hadiths have been sieved out from this great
One of the easiest words. The hard way to get over
body of
that.
material which totaled several 100,000 hadith reports, there were some hadiths which appeared to conflict with each other, with the verses of the Quran.
Very, very, very important. Even when the scholars gathered all the hadith, they got it all together, what they realized, some hadith contradict each other. Some hadith even contradict verses of the Quran. What do we do now? So now we've gathered it all. This is what's called data analysis, right? Does that make sense? Data analysis. It's a miracle. This is a miracle. I mean, Allah, if you can't just look at this, it's a miracle of Allah. And it's the proof of prophecy. And it's one of the proofs that our Prophet was a prophet when this happened. Because he said this deen will be preserved. How would he know this is going to happen? So there were hadith which appeared to conflict with each other. And some even hadith would contradict or conflict with verse of the Quran. What do we do now?
It needed a system that organized everything.
Alright, and essentially, brothers and sisters, this system, these are the four schools. The four madhahib. They systemized everything. They went through everything, they sifted through everything. and all the conflicts and the things that apparently go against each other, they systemized it and made it easy for you. All you've got to do is just follow them. All the hard work has been done for you.
It was obvious that simplistic approaches such as that of the Kharijites, namely establishing a small corpus of hadiths and deriving doctrines and law from them directly, was not going to work. The internal contradictions were too numerous, and the interpretations placed on them too complex for the Qadi scholars to be able to dish out judgment simply by opening the Quran and Hadith collections to an appropriate page.
So the approach of the Khawarij, the extremists, wasn't going to work because Islam is far more complex. Right? You can't just say, "Khalas, the verse of the Quran says this, the Hadith says that. We follow the Quran, we follow the Sunnah." Well, yes, but there's another Hadith that says this. Now what? You can choose to ignore that. That's what I see daily, to be honest. I see a lot of people having this particular mindset and say, "Oh, we look at the Hadith Sahih. Just follow the Hadith Sahih." Well, okay, well, when you follow the Hadith Sahih, but there's another Hadith that's Sahih that says the opposite of that Hadith Sahih. Now what? Now what? What do you do now? So the idea of you follow the Hadith Sahih, Barakallah fiqh, but there's two Hadiths that's Sahih in the same book. In the same book itself, as we'll find out, inshallah. Now what? That's the Khawarij like that, very simplistic. Just kill them whenever you find them. It's very simplistic. No context.
Much of the science of Islamic jurisprudence, usul al-fiqh, was developed in order to provide consistent mechanisms for resolving such conflicts in a way which ensured fidelity to the basic ethos of Islam.
We have fiqh. Fiqh is, you follow a particular method, Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanbali. That tells you what's halal, what's makruh, what's haram, what's permissible, what's not permissible. Usul al-fiqh is the mechanism behind. How do we get the ruling it is haram? How do we get the ruling it is makruh? How the mechanics behind it? You have the cogs behind the clock face. The clock face tells you what? It's 6:24. That's fiqh. Behind it, you pull back the clock face, you can see everything behind. That's usul al-fiqh. That's usul al-fiqh. We're going to stop there, inshallah. Those who want to, we are going to come back, or you should come back, inshallah, because that's the beginning. Inshallah, we're going to break for Salat al-Maghrib. Inshallah, I have it at 6:27. Inshallah. Yusuf, you can do that, 6:27. trying your best to get as much as possible from what I'm saying. So, are we okay to go? Video, live streaming. Come back there. Just make sure that the guys in front, you open your phones, that people behind. We had like 200 and something viewers last time, so in case you want 200 people seeing what you're posting who you're talking to, make sure you keep it live. So what we've discussed so far is that Islam needed to get its house in order, right? Sunni Orthodox Islam needed to do what? Get itself in order. Alright? Because these two other groups, for example, were causing a lot of problems and were destabilizing the Ummah at that particular time. I would argue that when the Ummah is in a unstable position or time, that these two themes, these two kind of methodologies will arise again. You know anything about what's happening in Yemen politically, you'll see this being played out. For those who are aware. So when there's a decline in following the four Sunni schools of Islam, you're going to have these two other divergent themes or groups. Take it as a rule. Whenever you have people leaving these four schools, you're going to have these two other extremes, because that's the only alternative. Well, you can add a third alternative, which is liberalism. That's another problem that causes a lot of problems as well. But my point is that these two things that happened historically, whenever we move away from classical Orthodox Sunni Islam, i.e. the four schools, you're inevitably going to end up one of these two camps. Arguably in this age, a third camp also, which is very liberalism. Wait, listen to that.
The term Taghut al-Adila, contradiction of proof text, is familiar to all students of Islamic jurisprudence as one of the most sensitive and complex of all Muslim legal concepts.
Let's go back. We mentioned what internal contradiction is too complex, and we also mentioned that much of the science of Islamic jurisprudence was developed in order to provide consistent mechanisms for resolving such conflict in a way which ensured fidelity to the basic ethos of Islam. Alright? Now let's really come into this part. Okay?
The ulama of usul recognized as their starting assumption that conflicts between the revealed texts were no more than conflicts of interpretation and could not reflect inconsistencies in the lawgiver's message as conveyed by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
I'm going to give you 20 seconds to let that sink in, and I'm going to ask you a question. 20 seconds. I'm going to start with the sisters as well. Right then. What does that mean?
Is it that like no matter what people say, like no matter what people say, like the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is like the correct one?
Keep going. Somebody else? Let's stick with the sisters. What does that mean?
If there's a difference between what the Quran says and what say a Hadith says, the difference won't be if the Hadith is known and sound, then it will be how people interpret the Hadith that's wrong.
Right.
Because the Quran has been protected and preserved over time, and that's like the definite. That's
The
how
hadith?
the hadith is also preserved, but at the same time, it has different ways of people looking at it.
Yeah, go ahead. So therefore, any contradictions?
Any contradictions would be on how people look at either the Quran or the hadith.
That's it. In other words, there's nothing wrong with the Quran and the hadith of a particular category, which we'll talk about in the future, inshallah. There's nothing wrong there. What's wrong is our interpretation. In other words, they're all valid. They're all Kalam Allah, Kalam Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi wa sallam. What Allah says in the Quran and what the Prophet say can't differ. There is no contradiction. But there is an apparent contradiction when you see the hadith, they don't match up with the verses of the Quran. Even verses of the Quran don't match up with each other. Now, of course, you guys don't know anything. That's why this is a bit strange. I will find out today. So there's no issue with the Quran. And there's no issue with the hadith of a particular calendar. So what do we do? How do we what? What's the word I'm looking for? How do we... Nope. Nope. Something else? How do we...
Unite.
Unite. So unite. Unite. Okay. Or resolve. Huh? Organize. Organize. I like what he said a bit better. Unite. How do you resolve the apparent contradiction?
The message of Islam had been perfectly conveyed before his demise. And the function of subsequent scholars was exclusively one of the interpretation, not of amendment.
Right, one of the brothers before found this concept. It's the first time he's come across this concept of hadith and having different interpretation in the sense that I was speaking about. But the point about all this is what? What am I trying to get across to you? At the end of the day, to do what I want at the end of this lecture, I want to prove to you the legitimacy of following. Bit louder, bit more enthusiasm. To follow the madhabs. Alright? Follow the schools of thought. Stay, listen.
Hadith of Anas ibn Malik that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whoever prays the dawn prayer Fajr in a group and then sits and does dhikr until the sun rises and then prays 2 rak'ahs shall have the like of the reward of a Hajj and an Umrah. Anas said, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, completely.
Right. I'm going to say to you guys, based on this hadith, when I pray the Fajr prayer in the Jama'ah, and I sit and do dhikr until sun rises, and then I pray 2 rak'at with Salat Ishraq or Duha, because of interpretation between schools, I'm going to have the reward of Hajj and Umrah, and I'm sat in Liverpool. And what did the Prophet say? Completely. I'm not going to Hajj then. I'm not going to Hajj. Why do I go to Hajj to get the reward? Just because sit at home and do that. The Prophet said it. I don't need to go Hajj. Follow the hadith. Follow the hadith. Can you prove to me why I have to go to Hajj? With hadith. And the hands go down quickly. With hadith. Don't give me hadith. And don't look at your phones either. Look at me hadith, sahih. Don't look at your phones.
Well, if you read the same hadith, it says the like of the reward, not the actual. So it's saying you get the reward of it, but you haven't actually done the Hajj.
Why do you go to Hajj? Why do we fast? Why do we pray? To do what? To get the reward. To get the reward. That's Islam, no. To get the reward. To get the reward goes Jannah. Give me hadith. Without looking at your phone or your iPad or anything else. Prove to me why I have to go to Hajj at the back.
Because the Prophet said that there are 5 obligatory pillars of Islam that you have to fulfill in order to be proper Muslim.
The same Prophet said, Tamatan, Tamatan, Tamatan.
But, I mean,
Hadith.
you can
Give me hadith.
the
I'm
hadith
giving you
says
hadith. You have to give me hadith.
5 pillars of Islam.
Yeah.
There are obligations that you must fulfill. And one of them is to
Completely. As the Prophet told me.
yeah, but you get the reward.
Give me hadith. I'll give you hadith. You have to give me hadith.
That's hadith.
I'll give you hadith. قال رسول الله. Did the Prophet not say this? The Prophet said it, huh? خلاص? Well, completely. What else do you want? The Prophet's not saying you got half reward. Or then, but he said completely. I'm not going to Hajj.
This is notified like a hadith.
Is it the Jibreel hadith?
Okay? And I'll say I've got the hadith here, the same Prophet. Up to now, you can't convince me. You can't convince me. Prophet said this.
Is it based on hadith? You're right. It's based on pure hadith. I'm taking it literally. You're right.
Yes. Say that again so they can hear. And the people live streaming. Say it again.
Taking the hadith purely literally and only that. You're right.
Yes. Take it literally. And that's the only thing I'm looking at, then I'm right. Obviously, I'm wrong. Just in case anyone's thinking that I'm stupid, right? I'm wrong. But based on that, what I did there, see what I did to you guys? I narrowed it down. This hadith and this hadith only. And then I forced you to give me a hadith, which you couldn't. You see? So I simplified it. Alright? I made it very simplistic. And our faith is not simplistic. This hadith, there's a story behind this. This is taken from Sheikh Moore's article. There was a man in Jordan, and he read this hadith. He picked the hadith up and read it. And he then came to the conclusion he does not need to go to Hajj or Umrah. And the Sheikh said to him, why have you not gone to Hajj or Umrah? And he said, Ya Sheikh, I don't need to. Okay, well, why not? Have you already been? No, I haven't been. But the hadith says here, when you pray Fajr in Jama'ah, and I sit and I do my azkar to Ishraq, and I get the reward of what? Hajj and Umrah, tamatan, completely. And that's his reason for not going to Hajj or Umrah. Now, obviously, that's ridiculous. But that approach, taking the hadith, what is wrong here? What's wrong? Talha, what's wrong? Yeah, okay, but what should I have done? Huh? Expert in what? Hadith, Aqidah, Tafsir, and particularly in the four. When you don't follow the four schools, it took a long time. I picked you up to fucking get quicker than that. When you don't follow the madhahib, what you're doing, you're choosing to ignore 1,000 years worth of Islamic scholarship, putting it to the side and say, right, I'm going to reinterpret everything again. The problem you're going to have is that you're going to find hadith like this. And you say, well, khalas, I just follow the hadith. Very simplistic. Like the Khawarij did. Very simplistic. What's wrong? And this brother, subhanAllah, did fulfill one of the 5 pillars of his religion because he took the hadith. Very simplistic. But when you bypass scholarship, you're going to get madness like this. And it plays out on many, many other roles. This is very simplistic. You'll be surprised how many times this plays out. Keep going.
But there is a larger lesson here that while the Quran and the Sunnah are divinely protected from error, the understanding of them is not.
This young man's understanding of the hadith was not protected from error. He was mistaken, right? The hadith or whatever rank it was. Yeah? The Prophet ﷺ said that. We don't disagree on that. So the hadith is there. But it's our understanding, our fahm that can get us into problems. The Quran and Sunnah are divinely protected from error, but the understanding of them is not. That's my point.
Someone who derives rulings from the Quran and Hadith without training in deduction from primary text will be responsible for it on the day of judgment. Just as an amateur doctor who had never been to medical school will be responsible if he performed an operation and somebody died under his knife.
The medics, you go to medical school to obviously be doctors. If you didn't do that and you went to perform surgery on somebody, you're going to end up in a high security prison in London somewhere. Right? Obviously, you deserve that. But what people do, unqualified people, they do something similar, but in a religious context. They butcher our faith. They butcher the hadith without any expertise. And just because a guy has a full beard and sings the Quran, mashallah alayh, doesn't mean that he's exempt from this. I've seen many examples of people do this. Look so many people. I've learned that the hard way. It means nothing. A beautiful voice in Quran means nothing. Right? Have you studied Sharia? Have you studied fiqh? Are you faqih? Which school? I want to see. You can sing Quran all day, all night. It means nothing to us.
Fasting on the day of Arafah for the non-pilgrim, it expiates the sins of the year before and the year after.
Yom Arafah, right? We fast Yom Arafah the day before Eid. And if you fast that day, what happens? The reward from? Huh? Go ahead, Fatima.
The previous year
and
the year to come.
Tamam. Get what?
Well, expiated, like they kind of like remove.
Tamam. Yeah, they get removed. Tamam, yes. MashaAllah, hadith sahih. And we fast. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts our fast. And the reward is there. Okay? Hadith sahih Muslim.
The question arises, what does one do when Arafah falls on a Friday, a Saturday, or a Sunday?
Is that a problem to begin with?
No.
Why? Hands up, why? Why is that not a problem? Why?
Just a normal day.
No, if you fast as not, you can get a reward, mate. Not a normal day.
Well, just like a white.
Is that based on knowledge? It's not a normal day. Raise your voice.
I don't know if this is correct or not, but from what I've read is that it's not advised to fast solely on just a Friday or Saturday or
Okay, it's interesting. You're not meant to fast on what? On a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday solely. Have you heard that before? Don't fast on a Friday, Saturday. Some of you have, right? Yom Arafah falls on a Friday. Now what? Yom Arafah falls on a Saturday. Now what? Yom Arafah falls on a Sunday. Now what? I got asked this a couple of years ago. My sister who converted to Islam, and she got asked this question. Well, she asked this question and people gave her the wrong answer. You can't fast on Saturday. You can't fast on a Friday. You can't fast. The girls who have days to make up from Ramadan. Yeah, let's say it falls on a Friday or something. By the way, you girls, if you have days to make up, and the guys, make them up now, inshallah, or definitely the next month or two because the days are very short. FYI. Point is, what does one do when Arafah falls on a Friday or Saturday or Sunday? Why is there a problem?
There is a rigorously authenticated hadith that prohibits fasting on a Friday alone.
Hadith sahih, rigorously authenticated. Hadith sahih, saying what? Prohibits fasting on Friday alone. Now that hadith says what? You can't fast on a Friday. Like Yom Arafah falls on a Friday. Now what? What do we do? Bukhari. Yeah? Muslim over here and Bukhari over here. Follow the hadith sahih. Both sahih.
And a well-authenticated hadith prohibits fasting on a Saturday alone. Tirmidhi explains the meaning of the offensiveness in this is when a man singles out Saturday to fast on, since the Jews venerate Saturdays.
So hadith saying you can't fast Friday, hadith saying you can't fast Saturday. But again, what happens when Arafah falls on a Friday or a Saturday? Now what?
Some scholars hold Sundays offensive to fast on for the same reason that they are venerated by non-Muslims. Other hadiths permit fasting one of these days together with the day before or the day after it. Perhaps because no religion venerates 2 of the days in a row.
Now what you would do, alright? Well, let me ask you first. What should you do in such a situation? Go to the hadith, try and make out yourselves, close your eyes and put your finger down and see which one what do you do? This is a question of halal, haram, wa kul mubah. Yeah? It's a question of permissible, not permissible. Who do we go to? Again, the schools, it's an issue of fiqh, issue of halal and haram. We go to the 4 madhabs. That's what you would do. Finished. You don't have to worry about it. But those who don't, fall into problems.
What should you do?
I told you what to do, but we'll listen in.
There is a third hadith related by a Muslim that is even more specific and says, do not single out Friday from among other days to fast on, unless it coincides with a fast one of you performs. Unless it coincides with a fast one of you performs.
Let's say you didn't follow the 4 schools, which you're an idiot for doing that. Alright? You're an idiot for doing that. Okay? What are you going to do? And that hadith you didn't know exists. You see the scholars of fiqh, Hanafi, Maliki, they know the hadith there. So they'll say to you, you can fast on a Friday, or it's makruh, they'll say. But if it falls on a day, Abu Mu'arraf, mustahab, recommended. Khalas, you don't have to worry about what's hadith. It's going to be working out for you. They'll tell you, just fast, it's okay, permissible. We want to bypass that, you get yourself into trouble. So that hadith exists in where? In Muslim. And many examples of this, again and again.
This hadith establishes for the mujtahid the general principle that the ruling for fasting on a day normally prohibited to fast, on changes when it coincides with a fast one of you performs, and so there is no problem with fasting whether the day of Arafah falls on a Friday, Saturday or Sunday.
So this particular sister, when she's fasting on a Friday because she had the day to make up, and this idiot of a woman, I'm sorry for calling her idiot, because she's an idiot, forgive me, she's telling the guy, you can't do that. The hadith says you can't fast on a Friday or something. I say, sit down, go with your knowledge, and stop accusing the sister. Because unlike you, the sister has recourse to scholars who tell her what to do. Unlike you, because you haven't got any knowledge, misguide and misguiding others. And that's what happens.
Here, whoever wants to understand the ruling of doing something in Islam must know all the texts connected with it.
See that line there? I want you to memorize it. Just memorize that, please. When anybody gives you a verse of Quran and it says Allah says kada wa kada, or a hadith that's the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says kada, and the ruling is kada, the ruling is based on this, we say, there's other hadith as well, my friend. There's other verses of Quran, barakallahu fiqh. Why are you choosing to ignore all the verses of Quran, or choose to ignore all the hadith? Why? And you'll see, if you stick with me, I'm going to give you examples of this again and again and again. Right? These are very simple ones, but I'll give you more relevant ones as we go on. People choosing to ignore all the hadith and all the verses of the Quran and saying, this is haram, or this is shirk, or this is bid'ah, famous one. No, there's other hadith, barakallahu fiqh, there's other hadith that exist in this matter. There's other verses of the Quran have an interpretation, but very simplistic. Very simplistic.
As ordinary Muslims, you and I are not only responsible for obeying the Quranic verses and hadiths we are familiar with. We are responsible for obeying all of them, those that we are aware of and those that we are not. The whole Sharia.
Okay, so just because you know one hadith, or the shaykh you've asked, his knowledge is based only because one or two hadith on this matter. Other ahadith exists that the shaykh, maybe due to the lack of knowledge, doesn't know, and you've taken to bash the whole world, based on the simple knowledge of this particular shaykh or particular understanding. We are responsible for following all the hadith that are on this matter. All the verses of the Quran that talk about this particular matter. Not the ones you just know.
And if we are not personally qualified to join between all of its texts, we must follow someone who can, which is why Allah tells us, ask those who recall if you know not.
So there's a proof in the Quran for following scholarship. I would add as proof of following one of the four schools. After hadith. Where's the dalil? Following one of the four schools? On top of the fact that Allah preserved the deen, Sharia, through these four schools. That wasn't a proof in itself.
A non-scholar, for example,
look at it, inshallah, when you have the notes, you can look at this one. Okay.
Visiting the graves. There is a well-authenticated Hasan hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, he warned against the women who visit graves.
Hadith Sahih Hasan, which is below Sahih, still at a very sound hadith. We have Sahih, we have Hasan. Still very strong. Saying what? The Prophet ﷺ saying, warning women, that's you guys, against what? Visiting the graves. Hadith Tirmidhi. So somebody says, Ukhti, haram, haram, you can't visit graves. Hadith. And gives you the hadith. And you're like, what do I do? Because the Prophet ﷺ warned against women visiting the graves. That's it now, you ain't going to visit any graves. Visit your loved one or whatever, you're just going to remember the akhirah. Hadith. Hasan. Now what? What are you going to say to me? Prove to me you can go visit graves.
Look at the context.
Hand up.
Look at the context of the hadith.
Was that you? I was looking down here. Okay, go ahead.
Look at the context of the hadith. So maybe the Prophet.
What's the context then? Tell me.
The Prophet probably was prohibiting.
We'll say probably. La.
I don't know. But
say I don't know. Say I don't know. Don't say probably. Probably, yumkin. No. It's Sharia. It's amana. If you're saying something about our deen, probably does not come into it. You mean what the Prophet says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I don't really expect you to, but my point, obviously, is that when we restrict ourselves to the hadith, what did I say before? We have to look at what?
Skills of thought.
Why do you guys sleep?
Skills of thought.
Not just context,
Skills
what
of
else?
thought.
The whole picture. I'm just giving you a piece of the puzzle. I said, that's it. The analogy, the elephant, and the elephant, it's a tail. I've got a blind, I've got an elephant, the elephant's, what do you call it?
Trunk.
I said that. The elephant, I describe the elephant by virtue of what I just felt. And that's the elephant. Somebody else who comes in and feels the elephant's ears and describes that as the elephant. And somebody else comes and grabs the tail. And somebody else comes and grabs the legs. And they all say something different, all describing the same thing. All coming up with what? The wrong thing. Why? Because we're not meant to look at pieces of the puzzle, we're meant to look at the whole, all the pieces of the jigsaw. And hadith are pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that you and I, we don't get. We have to ask the scholars, and the scholars are those who are qualified in one of the four schools, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, or Hanbali, whichever one of those four schools you follow, they'll give you the rest of the picture. They'll give it all to you. It's all been done. It's all been done for you, alhamdulillah. But my point is, I've given you hadith, and now you can't go to visit graves. But there's what? Where's the other piece of the jigsaw puzzle?
But scholars say that the prohibition of visiting graves was abrogated by the rigorously authenticated Sahih Hadith. I had forbidden for you to visit graves, but now visit them.
Pay attention. The hadith that the sister mentioned, what was your name again? By context. Shuruq. Certain hadith were mentioned at a particular time. And then the ruling changed, so the hadith changed later on. Which meant that the original hadith gets cancelled out. That's called an-nasikh wal-mansukh. It's a very sophisticated part of our Sharia that the scholars of Usul al-Fiqh have perfected. There are things which are haram in the beginning and became permissible at the end. So you pick a hadith and say, oh, the hadith says this. Hadith sahih. But another hadith says the opposite. Both sahih. What do you do? How do you reconcile between these two? Well, you follow your madhab. But how do the madhabs reconcile between this? They have this understanding of an-nasikh or mansukh. Things abrogates things gone before. You understand? This is very important. Pay attention. I don't want to lose anybody. Inshallah. So, the hadith is here to It's Hasan. We have a Sahih hadith that says, I have forbidden you to visit graves, but now visit them.
Here, although the expression now visit them is an imperative to men or a group, or to a group of whom at least some are men, the hadith permits women as well as men to now visit graves. This is shown by another hadith related by Muslim in his Sahih that...
Can I just pause you? Can you see how ridiculous and how simplistic the idea just follow the Sahih hadith is? Doesn't work. Doesn't work. Because all these hadiths are different. All saying different things. The idea, akhi, follow the hadith sahih and you're okay in English. The scholars of hadith, they just collected the hadith and all it into sahih, hasan, da'if, hasan al-dhati, sahih al-dhati, just organize it, put it all together. And the scholars of sharia, they're the ones that kind of pick through it and filter and produce the ruling. The idea just follow the hadith sahih won't give you the answer. That's why the scholars of hadith are not always scholars of fiqh. Not always. The scholars of hadith is a big thing. The scholars of fiqh is a different subject.
When Aisha asked the Prophet ﷺ what she should say if she visited graves, he told her, say, peace be upon the believers and the Muslims of the folk of these abodes. May Allah have mercy on those of us who have gone ahead and those who have stayed behind. Allah willing, we shall certainly be joining you.
Right, you girls. How is that a proof now for you to visit the graves? Answer. Why is that proof now? Anybody else have a problem here? Right, you guys in front. I think we'll be back over there with the blue or turquoise, as she said last week. What is the proof of that? Raise your voice so people on live stream can hear you. Which means that if it was haram for her to go visit, the Prophet would tell her what to say. So that's a proof in itself, right? That's what we're trying to say.
This plainly entails the permissibility of her visiting graves in order to say this. For the Prophet ﷺ would never have taught her these words if visiting the graves to say them had been disobedience.
That's what you meant, yeah? What's your name again?
Sophia.
Sophia.
In other words, knowing all these hadiths together with this methodological principle of nas or abrogation, it is essential to drawing the valid conclusion that the first hadith, in which the Prophet cursed women who visit graves was abrogated, cancelled out by the second hadith, as it is attested to by the third.
One of my relatives, a female relative, elderly woman, all she did was this hadith here. And when somebody passed away in the family, she didn't know what to do because she wanted to go and see, wanted to go and pay respects. All she knew was this hadith. You see, I have to try and explain to her. That's a very strong hadith. The Prophet cursed him. The Prophet doesn't curse often. When he does, it stands out. Because of fear. She didn't go. But we have to explain to what this was a hadith. So there's a practical example where things like this, when people don't follow madhabs, you get this problem.
The best known instance of this was the progressive prohibition of wine, which had been discouraged by an early Quranic verse, then condemned and finally prohibited.
Alcohol was what? Initially was discouraged by the Quran itself, then condemned, and finally, step by step. So let's say somebody takes a verse of Quran and says, well, you know, as we'll see now, they ask you about wine and gambling. Say, in them is great sin and yet some benefit. But their sin is greater than their benefit. Akhi, I'm going to drink alcohol. Yes, there's some benefit there. But obviously, there's some bad. I'll take the good and leave the bad. As some young people say. Does it say haram? That verse does not say haram. It is harm. Okay, it's harm. I accept this harm. This is medical harm. But does it prohibit me from drinking alcohol? No. If I take that verse alone, it proves I can drink alcohol. Or if I take this one, all you who have believed, do not approach prayer while you are intoxicated, until you know what you are saying. Marhaba, I'm not going to drink alcohol until the night, between Isha and Fajr. So verse of Allah said it, not me. Allah said it. I'm not going to drink during my prayer time. 2 weeks from now, I will be drinking from 6 all until 7 in the night, drink all night. Allah says in the Quran, it's there. Did Allah not say that? No. How? Well, obviously what? Finish off.
There is not upon those who believe and do righteousness any blame concerning what they have eaten in the past, if they now fear Allah and believe and do righteous deeds, and then fear Allah and believe, and then fear Allah and do good, and Allah loves the doers of good.
Here, what I've given you are verses of the Quran that you and I read day to day. We become closer to Allah Azza wa Jalla by reading these verses of the Quran. But the ruling in them no longer apply. Let me say it again. These verses, or the 2 verses before, no longer apply. Why? Because it's abrogated. Cancelled out. Verses in the Quran that have been cancelled out by the verses of the Quran. That's an obvious example. You can say, oh, Shaykh, it's obvious, we don't drink alcohol. I've given you obvious ones, but there's a whole bunch of ones that are less obvious. And come to hadith. Many hadith that are less obvious. But you're not following a madhab. And you're going to pick up hadith or you're going to follow a shaykh who does not follow a madhab. He or she is going to get you into a problem. He or she will end up getting you to do something which has already been cancelled out by another thing. Verses of the Quran that have been cancelled out by other verses. But we still read them. Okay, this is explicit.
Explicit. Easily identified, for it involves texts which themselves specify that an earlier ruling is being changed.
This is the idea of nasakh. We're going to finish off in the next 10 minutes. Don't worry. idea of abrogation is a whole science. That simply think of a hadith or the book of Allah and try and derive rulings without knowing this particular science will get into a lot of trouble. But there's two kinds of abrogation, explicit and implicit, sarih and dimni. So explicit is the hadith itself tells you what was cancelled out. That's very easy. The hadith itself tells you what has been cancelled out.
For instance, there is a verse in the Quran which commands the Muslims to turn in prayer to the Kaaba rather than to Jerusalem. In the hadith literature, this is even more frequently encountered. For example, in a hadith narrated by Imam Muslim, we read, I used to forbid you to visit graves, but you should now visit them.
That's that. One hadith, one line that tells you so-and-so used to, such and such a thing used to be haram, but now it's permissible. That's very easy to deal with. Class. But
commenting on this, the ulama hadith explained that in early Islam, when idolatrous practices were still fresh in people's memories, visiting graves had been forbidden because of the fear that some new Muslims might commit shirk. As the Muslims grew stronger in their monotheism with the time of the Prophet ﷺ, however, this prohibition was discarded and as no longer necessary, so that today it is a recommended practice for Muslims to go out to visit graves in order to pray for the dead and to be reminded of the akhirah. Implicit. The other type of nash is more subtle and often taxed the brilliance of the early ulama to the limit. It involves texts which cancel earlier ones or modify them substantially, but without actually stating that this has taken place.
this means what? This means that, unlike the first one, which is very clear, that tells you such and such a thing in the past was forbidden, but now you can do it. Like this is the graves for women. But there's other hadith where the Prophet is not telling you, in this particular hadith, what has been cancelled out. It's not clear what's been cancelled. And that's more difficult. And that's where the scholars of Usul al-Fiqh have had to use their brains.
And in the hadith literature, there is the example of the incident in which the Prophet ﷺ once told the companions that when he prayed sitting, because when he was burdened by some illnesses, they should sit behind him.
Right, pay attention. The Prophet ﷺ was once praying, and he led the prayer. And because he ﷺ was unwell, he led the prayer while sitting down. He led the prayer while sitting down. And he told the Sahaba to do what? To also sit down. Now, hadith sahih.
This hadith is given by Imam Muslim, and yet we find another hadith, also narrated by Muslim, which records an incident in which the companions prayed standing while the Prophet ﷺ was sitting.
So here's another hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ was praying sitting, again, unwell, but the Sahaba behind them are doing what? I want you to speak loud. Standing. Somebody comes and says, yeah, Shaykh, let's say I'm leading the prayer and I'm sitting down. I say, yeah, Shaykh, Ayub alayk, hadith sahih. You have to, us behind you, you have to sit down. The Prophet did it, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Prophet told the Sahaba to sit down. Why aren't you telling the people behind you to sit down? Hadith sahih. That's a Muslim. And all the hadiths are something different. The opposite. What do you do? What are you going to do? Mu'adh, what are you going to do? I don't expect you to have the answer.
I don't know the answer.
Good, you do that. Well, you should do. Should have the answer. And you guys in the back, that back row, +1, the back. What are you going to do? How are you going to resolve this? You're going to say, follow the Sahih Hadith, right? Follow the Hadith that is authenticated. Problem, they're both in the same book. They're both in Sahih Muslim. So that simplistic approach, Sahih Hadith, doesn't work here. Both in Sahih Muslim, both saying something different. Both Sahih. Go ahead. You have to look at the text. Okay. Look at the well, we've looked at the Hadith. The opposite. Anybody?
We might have to look at the tafsir to know which word was mansukh, was delayed in the hadith.
Do you know the simple answer to this? What's the answer to this question? Go and ask one of the people who study fiqh. Find a Hanafi, find a Maliki, or Shafi'i, or Hanbali, which is difficult. And ask them, they'll tell you, from the Shafi'i school, I don't even need to look at the Hadith. The Shafi'i school, one that can, if you are able to stand while praying, you stand. One that you do Safina, one of the conditions for Salah, in Safina, in Shafi'i fiqh, is stand at Qiyam. I don't need the Hadith. Someone comes and says, Ya Shaykh, the Hadith says this. I say, Afwan, with the Hadith of Muslim, I know. But the Shafi'i school says, we stand. But Shaykh, the Hadith is Sahih. You meant to follow the Shafi'i school or you meant to follow the Prophet? I said, I'll follow the Shafi'i school who followed the Prophet better than you and your dad. He said, better than you and your father. And your dad and great granddad, everybody together. Yeah, Imam Shafi'i knew the Hadith. The Shafi'i schools need to know the deen better than you and your Hadith Sahih. Do you think they didn't know that? Do you think Imam al-Nawawi, who wrote the commentary on Sahih Muslim, didn't know the Hadith was there? It vexes me out when people come with simplistic Hadith. The Hadith says this. I follow the Shafi'i school. That's my proof. I follow the Hanafi school. That's my proof. These are scholars who wrote commentaries on this Hadith. They need Hadith better than you. So it doesn't vex me when someone says, Akhi, Hadith says this. I'll give you an example. Please don't take offense. Give you an example. When I was in Cardiff, many stories about Cardiff. When I was an Imam in Cardiff, in the Shafi'i school, it's recommended, it's Sunnah Mu'akkad to pray 2 rak'at between the Adhan and the Aqamah. So we had this man come to the mosque, may Allah guide him, because he wasn't guided, and came and kicked up a big fuss. Shaykh, you should have prayed 2 rak'at between the Adhan and the Aqamah. And he has a hadith. I accept the hadith. But I have trust and confidence. Even though I don't know the hadith, even though I don't know the proof, I have confidence in my method. I have confidence in the 1,000 years worth of scholarship that they knew what they were talking about and they knew that hadith existed, but they had another hadith that proved something else. So without any blink, without skip the heartbeat, I took him to my library. I opened my Shafi'i fiqh book, it had videos. I opened up to him the hadith. I didn't know the hadith was there, in all honesty. I didn't know the hadith. But if you ask me, Shaykh, what's the proof for doing that? There's a hadith that says you don't. There and then I wouldn't be able to give him hadith. I don't need to. I don't need to. Because I'm following this, a school, a thought. And they got my back. They knew the hadith. So I went to the library, opened up the book, and gave it to him, and he read it. And I'm quiet. It was nice. I should have taken a picture of it. Few things. Ya gharib, kun adib. Oh, you go new, have some manners. Come to the mosque, you know anything about the mosque here. You come and cause a big fuss. I should have done it in front of people. Because certain people need to be, their backs need to be broken. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Saying just because you have one hadith, you're going to beat everybody over the head with this particular hadith. But again, when you have the confidence of following the school, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, when someone says, Ya Akhi, give me your dalil, Hanafi school. Ya Akhi, don't know all dalil, Hanafi school. You don't like it? You go find the dalil yourself. Go find out why Imam Abu Hanifa said that. Go find out why Imam Malik said that. I trust Imam Malik. I trust Imam Abu Hanifa. I trust Imam al-Shafi'i. If you have problems in trust, listen, I'm okay. I'm not going to waste my time. You go find the hadith yourself. But they said it. They give me the ruling. I don't need to look for the hadith. I trust them. That's what the point I'm trying to get across, inshallah. So, how do we deal with this? As Zen mentioned,
the apparent contradiction has been resolved by careful chronological analysis, which shows that the latter incident took place after the former, and therefore takes precedence over it.
the latter came what? The latter incident took place after the former. The last hadith took place after the first hadith. So we go to the last hadith. Bukhari won't tell you that. Muslim won't tell you that. Because that's not the point of Bukhari and Muslim. Bukhari and Muslim tell you Sahih, Da'if, Hasan, and so on and so forth. The Fuqaha, the scholars of Usul al-Fiqh, they'll tell you this because they worked out which one is. Which was before, which was later.
This has duly been recorded in the fiqh of the great scholars.
Which is why the Shafi'i school says you stand and pray. Even if the Imam is sick. Well, I'm going to stop there. All of this is to get you to understand the complex nature of a school of thought. You want to study your degree, or your master's, or your PhD, you want to go and get married, have kids, and everything else. You don't need to busy yourself with all these things unless you want to be a scholar. Just go, what Hanifi, ask a Hanifi Sheikh what the answer is. Ask a Maliki Sheikh, whichever school you're following, find a Sheikh who is proficient in that school, and that's it. That's all you need to do. And be safe in the hands of 1,000 years worth of scholarship. And know that you are far from any sin or any innovation. That's all you've got to do, inshallah. Okay, bismillah. We'll stop there. Any questions? Part 2, next week we're going to continue this in a bit more detail. Inshallah, our schools of thought. We're going to talk about what does it mean to be one of these imams? You know, the levels of what's called ijtihad. How do we reach a level? What kind of knowledge are we looking at to the aid of these imams that we're told to follow? Are they just half of the Quran or something a bit more depth? What are the credentials of these scholars? We're going to talk about the 4 imams as well, and maybe answer some of your questions and queries to do with these 4 schools that people now have thrown into doubt in people's minds. Bismillah. Any questions? 3 hands up. We'll start with the sisters and continue to go home first. Unless your question is, can I go home? In which case you can.
What happens if one of the different schools of thought disagree on something?
Done. Okay. Whichever school you're following is right. They're both right. All 4 schools, as we'll deal with next week, all 4 are correct. As long as you find one of the 4, you can be sound.
I was just going to ask about Mawlid and what your stance on that is.
Leave that for. I'm going to talk about a subject, because to talk about a subject, there's a lecture I have to do first on innovation and bid'ah. So, in order for you to understand the response, I have to talk. So the answer is coming to that. But have patience with me until I get everybody up to speed, so I won't understand the answer. That's also a reason for you to keep coming.
Do you know how alcohol is obviously not allowed? And obviously one of the hadiths says that it's not allowed. So what's the point of it? Why would they bring? Why would the two?
Okay, good question. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay, because the people at that time, alcohol was such a widely accepted and practiced thing, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it haram straight away, it's difficult. People are addicted to it. You know, there's hadith that talk about Sayyidina Hamza, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gradually phased it out. Bit by bit, until at the end. So we started by saying, look, during prayer time, don't drink. So the Muslims stopped drinking during prayer time, which left the night. And eventually Allah kind of cancelled it out completely. Allah's mercy, Allah's rahmah, and Allah knows the mindsets of humanity, and what's best for them, and how to take the jam off bit by bit, because People are addicted to it. Are you going to stop it straight away? Same thing with slavery. That got phased out bit by bit. Other things. Allah's divine wisdom. Just for that.
What do you say to people who say, like, so if you ask someone, what's your mother, and they reply, I'm a Muslim, and then they kind of like mix and match different brothers. They think, oh, Imam Hanafi said this, I'll do this. Imam Shafi'i said this, I'll do this.
Okay. Tell them to come to the class. Because these classes are there to kind of answer those questions. Part of your question is answered next week. We'll talk about etiquettes of following one of the 4 schools, and then if and when can you move out from a school, inshallah, certain situations where that's possible. So yeah, we'll talk about that next week.
What if somebody claims to follow one of the schools but
Raise your voices. People who are watching on live stream are interested in your questions, so just raise your voice.
Said, what if somebody claims to follow one of the 4 schools in fit, but they actually don't?
How do you know they don't? Huh? Give me an example without causing any trouble.
Without causing trouble.
I want to see how it works in
They
reality.
just say it, but they don't actually use it as a religion.
You know when you used to be at a school of thought? You used to do book by book by book. It took me 8 years to study all the books in Shafi'i school. And 2 books a day. One after Fajr, one in the evening. About 8 years. And towards the end of my studies, I was doing 5 classes a day of the same book. So when you study a madhab correctly, alright, you do things correctly. You do things correctly, and there's a methodology. You follow the school. Believe it or not, when you study at school, it makes you more tolerant of other people. I'm Shafi'i. I follow the Shafi'i school through and through, apart from Zakat. Zakat al-Fitr, I don't follow the Shafi'i school. Why? Because in Shafi'i school, Zakat al-Fitr has to be given in wheat or rice, the general food in that locality. That's kind of not very useful for people here. So I think the Hanafi school is that you give the qeemah. It works. In Zakat al-Fitr, I go to the Hanafi school. Most of the time, I go Shafi'i because I don't see a need to leave the school. But my point, when you study a madhab, you are taught tolerance of other opinions. It's one of the most beautiful things when you study a school of thought. Traditionally, this is my point. When you study a school of thought in a classical setting with the shaykh, that's taken from the shaykh, that's taken from the shaykh, you're going to be taught tolerance. By the very nature of the madhab, it teaches you tolerance. Because even when you study at Hanafi school, you've got Imam Hanifa and so even when the Hanafi school, that's very simple. In the Shafi'i school, you've got Imam Shafi'i, and you have Imam Nawawi, and you have Imam Rafi, you have Ibn Hajar al-Haythami, you have Imam Ramli, you have Al-Kurdi, you have a whole bunch of other scholars. So even when in the school, you're seeing difference of opinion on matters when you start studying to depth. And then you step out of your own school, and you say, well, the other schools have different opinions, and you're taught they're correct. They're all al-haq. They're all part of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ did things differently. And these 4 Imams have preserved the way that the Prophet did things differently. And there are legitimate differences in Arabic language. There are legitimate differences in Arabic language. Like in the Shafi'i school, touching a woman breaks your wudu. If I touch my wife, my wudu is gone. Right? In the Shafi'i school. Hanafi school, no. It's still haram to touch a woman, right? In the Hanafi school, it's haram to touch a woman. But in the Hanafi school, it doesn't break your wudu. In the Shafi'i school, it breaks your wudu. They both use the same verse of the Quran. primarily. In terms of the Quran, they both look at the same verse. Oh, la mastum an-nisa. That's the verse being used. Those are Arab. What does lamps mean? Lamps. Those are Arab. Touch. The Shafi'i scholars are lamps here means touch. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about touching, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about things that break your wudu, Allah mentions touching a woman. أو لامستم النساء. Lams, as she said, means touch. In Arabic language, lams means touch. Khas. Touching a woman breaks your wudu. The Hanafi school, no. The Hanafi school isn't that. Because they said lams here, in another verse of the Quran, Allah used the word lams to mean sexual intercourse. Allah used the word lams to sexual intercourse. So the Hanafi scholars have looked at it and go, hang on, there's another verse of the Quran that says it uses lams to mean sexual intercourse. So they've taken it that way. Two scholars have looked at the same verse of Quran and got with two different opinions. Both are valid in the Arabic language, because the Arabic language, lams means physical touch, but it also means sexual intercourse. Both are valid. They're both correct. Tolerance. You know when you step out and follow the schools, you know what happens? Intolerance. I've never seen a person who doesn't follow the schools except that he or she is the most intolerant person you'll ever meet in office. Haram. We've done hadith haram. Students in the past, I just can't bother talking to them anymore. There's other hadith, there's other hadith. Do you have a problem with the hadith? What's the problem? No, this is haram. Or this is shirk or whatever, or bid'ah. It's other hadith. الفق عليك تريد الإسلام يقول حديث. All the scholars said it. It's okay. No. Don't waste my time anymore. Get to work. Anyway, so that answers your question. Maybe. Right.
So as you got more physical, but recently I've come across something where someone said that there's also sects within those schools of thought.
There are what?
Like different sections within those.
Sections?
Yeah, like sects.
Sects?
Yeah, within those schools of thought. Is that something?
The issue with sects, when we come to Iman, we'll talk about them. The issue of sects. Keep the question of fiqh. Sects will deal with that. Come on, that will be good to them.
So you're going to do it?
Afwan, with somebody else before you.
It's not like how like you've got the four madhabs. Let's say there's two people who are Hanafi, where one person's Hanafi fiqh will ever be different to another person's Hanafi fiqh.
Right, so what you'll find, this is interesting, this goes to what we were saying. The Hanafis in the subcontinent are very different to the Hanafis, the Arab Hanafis. That's very interesting. There'll be certain things that we slightly difference of opinion, because in the Arab countries, certain practices may be different amongst the subcontinent. So the Hanafi school would differ. The Hanafis in Turkey are very different to the Hanafis in Pakistan. Both Hanafi, but there's some differences that are reflective of each culture. That's the beauty of Islam. It can adapt within the Sharia to accommodate certain things or to not accommodate certain things. Because obviously, Turkey and India are very different places. So the Hanafi school, generally I find the Arab Hanafis a bit more lenient than the subcontinent Hanafis, but I can really disagree with them. I'm not very kind of what I've seen. Both Hanafi.
You do a class on the experts that we should have, or
yes.
students on the general experts.
Yeah, inshallah. That'll be cool as well, inshallah.
The question is not related to topic.
Keep it on the topic then.
Okay.
Do you have the example that you showed, specifically the women basically grade one? Are these examples like, is that like the Shafi'i opinion, or is that like all forms of opinion?
From what I understand, again, this is a difference when you get between the subcontinent Hanafis and the Arab Hanafis. Obviously, there's a bit of a difference. Again, maybe some cultural things, but in terms of the basic Hanafi fiqh, Nur-i-Allah, he says in there that it's permissible for women to visit graves. Actually, the basic Hanafi fiqh. In terms of the Fatawa and the scholars of Hind, it differs slightly certain things that happened or have happened there that they kind of have changed to kind of reflect with their new things. I don't think how women, it's permissible for women to visit the graves. That's the Prophet said it. It's the Hadith saying.
So is that different from like the burial?
So when it comes to burial, in the Shafi'i school, it says it's makruh for women to attend the actual burial itself. Makruh. The reason why it's makruh is because the heaviness of the situation, particularly if someone has a relative of the person deceased, women are, generally speaking, by their nature, can be very soft. And it's not weakness, it's a strength. But the Shia recognize that this is a very difficult time, so it says it's better come afterwards. And I've seen that. Again in Cardiff, there was a janazah that I was presiding over, and then the women came. The Shafi'i school is makruh, it's like. Another opinion says permissible. I don't really have there's some differences. I'm not going to say you women have to go home. They're grieving. And there's differences of opinion. But I saw the wisdom in why it's makruh. Because here we are, we're burying this young man who died quite young. And the family, with the mother passes out. No time. So now, the focus instead on being on the son, burying the son, and getting him, mashallah, to the Jannah, inshallah, that's waiting for him, we're now having to what? Deal with the mother. So they can just left, and we'll try to look after what's happening with the mother. That's the wisdom in our Sharia. There's wisdom in it. The scholars weren't misogynists. They weren't. They had wisdom. They realized this is a difficult time. So they're saying it's nothing. But if you want to come, but the Sharia recognize that it's a difficult time. And I've seen the wisdom of it. Before we go back to Zuhair, anybody else have a hand up on Zuhair? Zen.
Since last week we studied that majority of Islamic scholars will not agree upon something which is not right. And since last week I've been trying to find some examples, but I couldn't find one. But except one instance, like
you should have one tonight. You should have one tonight. They've all agreed upon one of the 4 schools.
Yeah,
that's my point.
I managed to find one example, like back in Ottoman Empire days, when Kaaba used to be in the supervision of Ottomans, and there were 4 different, you can say, mosque points in the Kaaba.
Stations.
Yeah.
One for the Hanafis, one for the Shafi'i.
One with Maliki and one with Hanbali. And then when Ottoman Empire was just broken down after the World War and all that, and now that's gone.
All that.
And in this instance, was the majority of Muslim right at that time when they have 4 spots, or the Muslim is?
I've seen scholars differ on that particular issue. Some say it's a good idea, some say it's not a good idea. Wallah alam. I've heard scholars say different things on that particular issue. The idea that the madhabs divided the ummah is rubbish. That has been historically incorrect. When we didn't have the 4 schools, we had the chaos in the beginning of the time. Mentioned about to happen, the sex with the Shia and the Khawarij. That's the time when there's no schools. So when we move away from the 4 schools, we get into chaos. We get into the chaos of ISIS. Every single person that I've worked with in prison, and I've worked with a lot, who are from ISIS, every single one don't follow that. Not one. To this day. From now to Yom Qiyamah, they won't change. And that's how they are. If they follow the madhab, they wouldn't be in prison. They will not be in prison. Because the schools of thought don't teach killing. They teach tolerance. There we go. These guys are posters for following methods. Follow a method, otherwise you'll be in prison. But the states are saying you have to follow a method because we're doing everything Islamic way. What they're saying, no, we don't follow a method. Interesting. Go ahead.
The dimly that doesn't that just cause extra work for people because if you don't actually write that application that you've made.
You don't make the application. You follow the school. The schools of thought tell you, but the schools don't tell you, don't even have to tell you all that. When you went out, you don't have to do anything, you just follow the school.
Didn't they cause extra risk to the scholars?
That's why I said it attacks the most brilliant minds. These slides you will get in shot. Bismillah. Bismillah. The one of that one. You had your hand up, right? Bismillah.
For example, say I follow a madhab where they have a specific group, but there's another madhab that says this is allowed, but my madhab says it isn't. For example, say like Rafa'ideen, where it says like.
Raise your voice. You're asking a very good question. I want people who are listen to live stream to hear you.
For example, like I raise my hands when I come up from like something that's to do with ruku. But my madhab doesn't follow that. Am I allowed? It's not. Is it pick and choosing? I'm not too sure.
Okay, so you're saying the school you follow says it's recommended to raise your hands.
It's not.
It's not, but you choose to.
Yeah.
Wait. The question is raising the hands recommended or obligatory?
I know it's a sunnah.
It's a sunnah.
But I'm saying says in my madhab says like not to do it, but
Anyway.
another one says that.
I get you. So in the Shafi'i school, let's say the Hanafi school is the proof that they hold is that it's stronger, it's more superior to when you come out of ruku' not to raise your hands in the Hanafi school. Valid position. Right? Now, if somebody in Shafi'i, for example, chose to follow the position where you don't raise your hands, you can. Because those things don't invalidate your prayer. So I'll give you an example. In Salah, now and again, I'll put my hands down my side. That's an opinion in the Maliki school. Some of the people of innovation in this age say that's wrong. Well, again, they're people of innovation. We don't listen to them anyway. Sometimes I'll do that. I'm a Shafi'i, and the Shafi'i school hold it's stronger to place your hands above the navel here in the Shafi'i school. But if I put my hands down, does it invalidate my prayer? So stuff like that is okay. It's okay because you're recognizing there's another school. The problem is when you start to pick and mix and it causes problems. I'm going to tell you that now or next week, how much energy you have. You're awake. It's 8 o'clock. Well, I won't tell you what. But yeah, learn the school of thought. Learn the school of thought. Stick to whichever madhab you follow, they're all correct. Just get on the bus and get to where you're going. The destination is Allah. The bus is a madhab. Get on the bus and get to where you're going. Get to where Allah. And you want to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's all the madhab is. The madhab is about you teaching you how to pray, how to fast, how to do zakah, how to get married, how to get divorced, how to get all these things. The madhabs tell you how to do all of that according to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And every single one should learn a madhab. All have to learn a madhab. You take a book, like in the Shafi'i school, a book called Safina, you teach that, or in the Hanafi school, it's called Nur al-Allah. And in the Maliki school, there's a book by I forgot the name of the book. Al-Risala. Very basic book in your fiqh. You find the shaykh and you study your fiqh. It doesn't take very long. It's very, very simple. You find out what are the obligatory things in the wudu, what are the things that invalidate the wudu, what are the obligatory things in salah, what things invalidate salah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Nothing there very quickly. Well, you get on with your life. The problem is that you don't do that. No problems. Sister at the back, behind you. Ayo.
I was just going to ask you, can you give a little brief about Salafi? Does that come under a madhab, and what are the sources that they get their authenticity from?
This semester, I'm going to focus on the 4 schools and the schools of Aqidah and spirituality. The second semester, I will probably dip into that. So you have to go
Is
next
that a
semester.
part of, could you be a Salafi and follow a particular madhab?
Next semester, I'll talk about it. Inshallah. Because in order to answer that, there's a lot of things that have to be explained. So next semester, I'll talk about that. Sister at the back. No? I sure saw some sun. Wait, I'll move back to the guys.
There was a question about you were reading Salah.
Reading Salah in?
And when you're in Sajda, and if accidentally your foot.
Raise your voice, I can't hear you.
You know, when you're in Salah and you're in Sajda and your foot accidentally raises, does that invalidate your Salah?
Like, in the Shafi'i school, the verb, again, you're asking me, as someone who's trained in the Shafi'i school, I can only give you what the Shafi'i school says. If you're looking for the Hanafi school, you're asking the wrong person. It takes about 8 years to have some depth in the Shafi'i school. I haven't got any more years left to go to a Hanafi school, or a Maliki school, or a Hanbali school. But so I don't know the answer in the Hanafi school. In the Shafi'i school, both, there are 7 parts of the body that have to be touching the ground for a very brief period of time. The forehead, the hands, 2 knees, and the toes of each foot. Each of those have to be touching in sujood for a period of time. The ulama say, the time it takes to say the word subhanallah. All those parts, those 7 parts, have to be touching the floor at that moment in time. Should you then, after that, raise your foot up for some strange reason, doesn't invalidate prayer. That's makruh in the Shafi'i school. If that makes any sense. Ayo?
I just wanted to ask about like this to do with hadith interpretation.
With what?
Hadith interpretation.
Ayo?
So you know the hadith actions are judged by intentions. I mean, I've heard like a lot of people say this when they want to try and excuse themselves. So like, to what extent can we kind of like, I don't know, I think you once gave an example in one of your journals, you said that...
You listened to my husband?
Yeah.
Someone's...
You said that you heard about...
Sometimes I don't know, I'm in the khutbahs, I'm thinking, these guys, the guys, I used to see them, so I don't know if they're listening. Sometimes they're half asleep, sometimes on the phone, sometimes listening, sometimes, I don't really know, but at least women listening, that's something.
You said that someone came to you and they'd been with someone else, but they only went because they wanted to take the people who got drunk home. So,
and he said that with a straight face, like laughing at me. Seriously?
So like, to what extent, like, I guess, or even stuff like lying to someone because you don't want to hurt their feelings, so like, you know what I mean?
Okay, so this is, going back to our Sharia, when it comes to tazkiyah, and purification and etiquettes, you're asking a very broad question. So I don't know how to answer something that's so broad. If you're asking me, can you lie? No. And you're asking me, are there exceptions? Yes. Well, those exceptions you will find yourself in. So you can't lie. That's what you're asking.
Yeah. I don't know.
Formulate the question and to ask me and answer it. It's a very broad question.
I guess that there's not like a clear guideline as such to what can be excused in that.
Yes, there is.
There is.
Yeah, there is. It's just that no one's taught it to you. There is. Anything else from you?
That's fine.
Ladies first. Anything else? No?
So is it, because I had a similar question as well, so is it like the idea of fiqh and Quran, that's, you need to be guided by fiqh and madhab and that sort of stuff. But the idea of like, let's say, something that could be that permissible, when it turns into a good deed, is that dependent on your intention and stuff like that? So
give me an example.
So for example, let's say, I don't know, you wear a set of...
Farhan's getting tired. Give me an example.
So let's say you wear like a jubba.
Ayo, you wear a jubba?
Yeah. And if you wear it purely because you like it, is there a difference in your reward if you wear it?
Okay. You see, when you study fiqh, is in the Shafi'i school, there's 5 rulings. Haram, wajib, makruh, mubah, and mustahab. When they talk about these things, the rulings, they talk about there are certain rulings that they are permissible. It is permissible to sit down. Is it haram? Is it obligatory? Is it recommended? No, just permissible. The vast majority of human actions fall into the category of permissible. It's permissible to open your mouth, close your mouth. It's permissible to witness. It's permissible to drink water. However, should drinking water coincide with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? And you're emanating the best of creation, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And you found the etiquettes, including sitting down and drink, it's a sunnah. And he said, alhamdulillah. All of those things transform the mundane, which doesn't have a reward. If I drink water, it doesn't have a reward. If I sit down, it doesn't have a reward. But if it has an intention, then that act becomes an act of worship. So it becomes from permissible to mustahab. So let's say a sheikh comes in and he comes towards me, and I'm sitting down. If I'm getting up, out of respect, shake his hand. Getting up is an action that's permissible. There's no reward. That's the point. There's no reward associated with it. However, my intention now is to get up and say salam to the sheikh, or get up and say salam to my mother, or to my father, or get up to go and pray, or get up to save somebody who's about to fall out the window. So all these things can flip an action into an act of reward. Perfect example. You guys are studying whatever it is you're studying. If you're doing it for religious reasons, you get the reward. If you're doing it just to have a lot of money and whatever else you want to do, significantly less reward, maybe sin. But if you're studying a course because you want to do something for this ummah, every class you come to, you are in an act of worship. Every time you walk to your lecture, you gain reward because you're going in a perpetual act of worship. Why? Because your course, you are doing your course as an act of worship. You want to use this course to benefit the ummah. That's an act. So that's a worship. And so remember that when you don't want to get off your 9 o'clock lecture in the morning, Monday morning, for example. Remember your intention. If this ties into what you were saying, your intention can change your courses. So you're here for 2, 3, 4, however many years you are here. Make the rule, make the intention that you want to have your course. You're doing it lillah. You're doing it for something Islamic, the benefit of humanity. And you get your 2-1 or your first, and you gain like all this reward on your Mahiyana. Why not? Why lose out? Make the most of it. Well, it goes back to intention. In al-a'mal bin-niyat, deeds are judged by intention. Likewise, the opposite. You could be doing a good act, you could be praying, you could be wearing hijab, having a beard, doing a khutbah, doing a talk, talking right now. But if you are showing off, it's not sincere. It's for some other worldly pleasure or for no other worldly gain, then the person doing it gains a sin. Outwardly, looks good. Inwardly, that's what matters. Allah does not look towards your body, your forms. Allah looks towards your hearts. What's your heart? Your heart is not there, and your body is there. You could be in Mecca, going around the Kaaba, and your heart is in Las Vegas. Allah is not at the heart. Where's your heart? In Las Vegas? That's like your reward. And somebody could be in Las Vegas. Don't ask me why. But they're there. But the heart is in Mecca. The reward is where the heart is. Allahu Ta'ala. Anything else? Keep it on to this one. I got a complaint last week. The complaint was, why did this question they stop recording? I got asked that question. He said, what was the answer to the question? He said, what was the question? What was the answer? This is that problem you know. Let's go and talk louder. Okay, yeah. No problem at all. Hanafi can write to Shafi'i, and Shafi'i can write to Maliki, and Maliki can write to Hanbali. No problem. I've seen it. No problem at all. Whichever they agree on. It's not a problem. The differences are minor. The differences are very small differences. But maybe when you come to get married to somebody, you ask her, what school? Alhamdulillah, she understands the school. And that's a miracle. Or the guy understands the school. This day and age, I'd be happy with that. He understands the method, so mashallah. But yeah, it's not a big problem. Married, exist with each other. Centuries, no problem at all. The differences aren't as big. We're not talking about different sects. Not minor difference of the people. 80% of the school They mean the same thing. Differences, not differences, not major.
What does like the former Hizb say about like student finance?
Save the question. Ask somebody who's proficient in that, and Sheikh Harun Hanif is probably worth asking, and that's a particular topic. There's a difference of opinion. That's all I can say.
Like the Shafi'i school?
There's a difference of opinion on that. Difference of opinion.
You know the question.
I knew this would get me going. I knew this. I've said everything I can say to you.
I mean,
No.
It's not under the finance itself. What about the Usul kind of thing, right? So it's the idea of
Usul. Did you know that word before today?
It's the idea of student finance.
I knew it. I've said everything. There's nothing else new I can say. Next topic. Listen. Go ahead.
You know, like scholars from the subcontinent, traditional scholars from the subcontinent,
Yeah.
they generally say that there's a hadith that says the Prophet said that you have a beard, like a fistful, like a fistful beard, so they always keep big beards. Like generally, if you think of subcontinent scholars, they have big beards. And then some scholars like from like you're from Yemen.
You're Shafi'i.
Yeah, you're Shafi'i. So like a lot of scholars from Yemen, they don't.
So when it comes to the beard, right? It's very interesting. The Shafi'i school is perhaps the most lenient when it comes to beards in the Shafi'i school. So they say that the beard on the face, there are 20 hairs that can appear on the human body, on the face of a human being, on the man, not 60. And each hair that grows on your face has a very specific name with the Arabs. So that there's hair obviously that grows in the eyebrows, that has a particular name. Your eyelashes have a particular name. But the word the Arabic for beard is what? What in Arabic language? Was it Arab?
Is it Nihya?
Is it Nihya?
Is it
Nihya. When it comes to linguistically, what did the Arabs refer to as lihya? If you go back to the actual Arabic itself, they say ash-sha'r an-nabit ala diqn, which translates as the hair that grows on one's chin. Linguistically, the Arabs understood a beard to mean the hair that grows on one's chin. Like what about the hair over here? These are called al-aradain in the Arabic language. Al-aradain. Speaks an Arab who's educated, and they'll say, and understand, which is difficult in this day and age, they said that in the pure Arabic, the hair that goes on one's chin, that's what's called lihya, what we call a beard. The hair that goes on one's jawbone is called al-aradain. So the Shafi'i school say, the hair that goes on one's chin, that's a beard. You gain the sunnah of that having beard on your chin. Imam al-Nawawi, who's a Shafi'i scholar, as a commentary on Sahih Muslim, in there he says the beard for him is the hair that grows on the chin and the hair that grows on the jawbone. Specifically on the jawbone. The hair above the jawbone is not, and the cheek is not called beard. You see? So the difference is there. Now with the Hanafi school, in the subcontinent, for example, they hold that they have proofs and they hold the beard is like you mentioned. The Arab Hanafis will say something different. There's differences. But the only problem is that when one holds everything else is wrong and this is right, that's what I'm problem. We're going to pray Isha. Those who want to pray Isha, we'll pray Isha now. I think the time has come in. Thank you for coming. Please come back next week.